What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be talking about Jessica Boynton. Was it a suicide? Did the police department cover it up because her cop husband did it? I don't know. I know I have my thoughts, so let's just jump in. At the time of this crime, Jessica Boynton was just 19 years old and living with her husband, Matthew Boynton, and their two young children, Tyler and Tolan. The family lived in the small town of Griffin, Georgia, which by all accounts is the kind of community where people don't worry much about crime. It's one of those like small town vibe feels, not super small, but everybody could know everybody else. And not that people left their doors unlocked at night, but they really didn't have a lot of violent crime in Griffin, Georgia. It's generally thought of as an ideal place to raise a family. What I read was Jessica and Matthew were high school sweethearts who met in 2012 at an open house. I don't know if that's like an open house, like a realtor open house. I don't know what other kind of open house it would be, but it sounds weird that, like, because even after they got married, they didn't buy a house, so why they would have been in an open house, I don't know. Feel free to do further research, but they met in 2012. They immediately fell in love, and they ended up being high school sweethearts. Not very long at all after first meeting, Jessica became pregnant with the couple's first child, a little boy who they named Tolan. And very soon after that, on October 24th, 2015, the couple did decide to get married. Jessica loved everything about being a wife and being a mother, and she absolutely doted on her son. And about a year and a half after Tolan was born, the couple had their second son, and they named him Tyler. Once again, Jessica seemed to be made for motherhood and just really loved watching her boys grow up and just doting on them and being an amazing mom. It was at this point, a little bit after Tyler was born, that Matthew decided to finally start focusing on his long-term goal of becoming a police officer. He very quickly did, in fact, achieve this goal, and he became a police officer with the Griffin Police Department. The family moved into a 3-bedroom apartment, and they were really looking forward to their future. By all accounts, on the outside looking in, they seemed like the perfect family. They were the ideal couple. They had the most ideal and perfect relationship. However, let's scratch the surface for a minute and see what was really going on in the Boynton home. According to neighbors who shared walls with the family because they lived in an apartment complex, namely the neighbor downstairs, directly downstairs from them, stated that the couple argued all the time, and it seemed neither of them were happy or content in the marriage. Not only did this neighbor hear constant arguing, but she also became really close with Jessica, and Jessica had confided in her on numerous occasions that she wanted out of the marriage, that Matthew was cheating on her. He was having an affair, and she was tired of it. She was tired of the arguing, and she just wanted out. It seemed like Matthew did too. This neighbor is actually the one who told investigators later on, after the crime happened, that Jessica kept a secret diary where she documented everything about all the arguments that Matthew had, everything about his affair, things that he would threaten her with, and she kept it hidden in their closet in the master bedroom somewhere. She also documented, and mostly documented in this notebook, all of the times that Matthew would take off for days at a time without telling her, with the couple's 2 children, no less. So he would just take the kids and take off for a few days and not even let her know that he was leaving, let her know where he was going. And he wouldn't answer the phone for her when she would try to call. Jessica was eventually able to confirm, she found some kind of proof, and I don't know what that is, that Matthew was indeed having an affair, and it was with a dispatcher at the Spalding County Police Department. So technically he was having an affair with a coworker, which, not even going to go into how effed up and unethical that is. First of all, you don't have an affair, you get divorced, but with a coworker, no less. But according to friends and family, Jessica was actually really relieved and happy to finally be able to have proof of this, because she finally had something that she could use as leverage to get her divorce from Matthew, and just move on from her life and move forward from this obviously toxic relationship. She felt it gave her some kind of closure, and she couldn't wait to move on with her life with her children. She just wanted a fresh start, and she loved being a mom so much that she actually was looking forward to being a single mom and being able to raise her children the way she wanted, not having to worry about them being taken from her for days at a time. She was just all around excited about this affair her husband was having, because it gave her what she needed in order to be able to end that relationship and move forward for her and her children. It was right around this time when Jessica found out about the affair that she and Matthew both agreed that maybe it was time to move on. He agreed with her that they should get a divorce, and it started off really amicably, but eventually, as things do, you're living under the same roof with someone that you want a divorce from, that you no longer want to be with. Tensions rise, especially when one of the people is already seeing someone else, and that someone else could be attributed to the reason that the whole relationship ended in the first place. It put a really big strain on the already broken and toxic relationship. It was bad. As I just stated, keep in mind the couple were still living under the same roof at this time. Neither had been able to move out, or neither was going to move out. I'm not sure why they were still living under the same roof. I think Jessica did not have her own financial resources, but that's just me speculating. Matthew started complaining right around this time also to friends and coworkers, pretty much anyone who listened, and he was complaining that Jessica was becoming physically violent and abusive towards him now that, they decided to get the divorce. Like, things had escalated on her end, and she was becoming violent and beating him up, allegedly. Also, keep in mind that Jessica was still recording every little detail in that secret diary of hers. And right around when Tolan was 2 years old and Tyler was 8 months, Jessica decided that she needed to go out and go to work and get a job, because she was going to be a single mom soon, and she needed to be able to financially support herself and her children. She didn't want to have to depend on Matthew. I guess she saw something in the way he is that she thought maybe she might have to swing it herself. And plus, they were getting a divorce. She should go out and try to be financially independent. Up until this point, she had the luxury of being able to be a homemaker. Eventually, Jessica got an interview at a chiropractor's office. I'm not sure what the position was, but she aced the interview. She got the job, and she was very excited because this was a step toward the independence she was so desperately seeking for herself and her sons at this point. She just wanted out. She wanted to take her boys and get the heck out of Dodge. On April 14th, 2016, Matthew called his lieutenant on a personal phone call and informed the lieutenant that Jessica was once again being physically violent with him. She was hitting him. She was poking him in the chest during an argument. Whatever was going on at this point, Jessica brought her kids over to one of the neighbors' houses. The neighbor later reported that Jessica was extremely upset when she showed up on her doorstep with the 2 boys. She was desperate to get away from the situation, to get away from Matthew. A few minutes after Jessica got to the neighbor's house with the boys that night, Matthew started texting her and demanding that she go to Walmart with him, with the boys, to pick up baby formula for their infant son, Tyler. To me, this was really bizarre. Like, you're in the middle of this big argument and she's physically assaulting you by poking you in the chest, and you're just concerned with going to the Walmart for baby formula, but the baby's not even in the house. I don't know. This just struck me as weird. Like, if I'm in the middle of a fight like that, where like supposedly like I'm getting physical, I'm going to back out of that situation, and I'm not going to want to go back. And if I'm the one being physically abused, I'm certainly not going to invite that person back into the home within minutes of them leaving while the situation's still escalated, especially after I just called the police on them to make a report. But that's just me. What do I know? Before Jessica left to go to the store with Matthew, the neighbor insisted that Jessica come back to her house to spend the night with the 2 boys. Jessica agreed and said that after the Walmart trip, she would come back. She would stay the night with the boys at the neighbor's house. But unfortunately, Jessica never made it back to the neighbor's house that night. At 10:15 p.m., surveillance footage picked up Jessica and Matthew and the 2 boys entering the Walmart, and the security footage inside the Walmart store, like in the baby formula aisle while they were picking out the baby formula, you can literally, I wish that I knew how to put video in, because you can literally see the tension, and you can tell that they were starting to argue again right in the middle of the Walmart store. And sure enough, right when you start to think that, Jessica storms out of the Walmart. That was around 10:30 p.m. when she stormed out, just because this is a very tight and specific time frame all throughout the rest of this night and the following morning. So 10:30 p.m., Jessica, they're arguing, she storms out of the Walmart, and we know this because of the surveillance footage. While Jessica was storming out of the Walmart at 10:30 p.m., Matthew was texting a coworker and telling the coworker that he had just had an argument with Jessica in Walmart and she stormed out and was refusing to leave the store with him. Now, this is interesting because it's actually a blatant lie. She was seen storming out of the Walmart. Matthew texted or called. I think he texted his coworker for some reason, telling the coworker this. I don't know if it was the woman he was having an affair with. I'm not sure. But the surveillance video also picks up Jessica just 4 or 5 minutes later coming back into the Walmart to rejoin Matthew and the kids. And it also shows them checking out and all 4 of them going out into the parking lot together, and specifically shows Jessica getting into the couple's truck. So she did storm out of the Walmart, but she went back in, and all 4, Jessica, Matthew, Tyler, and Tolan, left the Walmart together that night and drove back home. It's just a heads up, it's super windy outside, so if you hear banging, that's like the wind and trees. There's nothing I can do about it. My windows are closed. Anyway, the family arrived back home that night from the Walmart trip at around 11 o'clock p.m., just a couple minutes before. Jessica was starting her new job at the chiropractor's office the very next day, and I'm sure I can't even imagine how stressful this was for her, that she has all of this arguing and fighting going on. The kids are up at almost 11 p.m. and she still has to pick out an outfit to wear for the next day to start work. Not to mention she has to start this new job with all this stress going on. Eventually she did get the kids settled down and she went into her walk-in closet to try and choose the best outfit for her first day at her new job the next morning. So reports say that around 10:53 p.m. on that same night, while Jessica was in her closet trying to choose the perfect outfit for the next day, an officer was dispatched to the Boynton's apartment for a non-emergency call. Matthew had once again called the police and claimed that Jessica was physically assaulting him. The responding officer's name was Officer Trammell, and his report contained 2 incidents that Matthew had cited to him that night about what had happened and why he had called the police. The first alleged incident Matthew reported was that while he was taking a shower, he was on his cell phone. Jessica stormed in and snatched the phone out of his hands and was repeatedly poking him in his chest and demanding that he admit that he was having an affair. He alleges that she refused to give him back his phone until he admitted that he was cheating on her. The second alleged incident Matthew reported to Officer Trammell was something that he said happened at the Walmart while the couple was buying the baby formula. He said the argument had gotten so bad and so heated that Jessica had stormed out of the Walmart and refused to leave the store with him to go home, that he did not know how Jessica got home from the Walmart, but she stormed out and he ended up leaving with his 2 kids and left her at the Walmart. This tickled my brain from the very beginning, but knowing what happens at the end here. So basically, the next information I have is that the Officer Trammell did not ask to speak to Jessica. He did not speak to Jessica that night. He only took Matthew's report. And I thought that was really weird. I'm like, why would he do that? I remember being in situations where, you know, I would fight with my ex all the time. And one time I had an accident. I was on crutches and I dropped the crutches while I was getting in the shower. The downstairs neighbor thought we were going at it again, fighting, and called the police. And when the police came in, I yelled from the shower and he's like, no, you need to get out of the shower and come show yourself. But this officer didn't do that. And I thought it was really weird. And I thought it was maybe because he was like super friendly with Matthew. But what I think it actually was that Matthew said that Jessica was not home because he left her at the Walmart just within 10 minutes before this officer was dispatched. However, I think it really unprofessional of this officer to not make sure that Jessica was not in the house and hurt, to not go out of his way to get her account of what happened, and to go out of his way to go inside the house and make sure that Matthew was not in fact lying, that Jessica really wasn't there, that he had left her at the Walmart. Now we know, and investigators eventually found out, that Matthew's lying through his teeth because there's surveillance footage from the Walmart that shows, as I stated, Jessica going back in after she stormed out and the family leaving together to go home. It's just highly unusual for everything I've known, all these cases that I've researched and what I've experienced in my personal life, for a police officer to respond to a scene, a domestic violence call, even though it was a non-emergency, and only hear one side of the story, take that person's report and leave. Then again, this was one of Matthew's coworkers. Matthew was a police officer for the Griffin Police Department who was dispatched to their house because the apartment's in Griffin. At around 12:50 a.m. that same night, or actually it's like continuation of the night, but it's early the following morning, so April 15th, Matthew starts texting a fellow police officer and his best friend, Josh Guthrie, from the Boynton residence. He and Josh Guthrie decide to meet at the Waffle House that's about 4 miles from the Boynton home to get something to eat and just kind of hang out for a little bit at 12:50 in the morning. According to Matthew, right before he left to go to the Waffle House, Jessica requested that he call an ambulance for her. When he asked her multiple times why she would need an ambulance, she did not answer and slammed the door in his face. So instead of being concerned for his wife, who is now left alone with his two very young children, one of them an infant and the other barely a toddler, he decided, she'll be okay, and left to go to the Waffle House. According to cell phone records, while all of this was going on, Matthew was texting his mistress. In fact, it later came out that Matthew had sent 68 text messages to his mistress throughout the night. At around 12:54 a.m. this same night, Matthew allegedly received a very strange text from Jessica's cell phone. The text read, quote, "I can't do this anymore. Take care of Tolan and Tyler. Please tell them I love them every day. I've been suffering for a while now and no one has noticed. Here lately, I have not been able to recognize the person I see in the mirror. This is not the first time I have had suicide thoughts. I love you and the boys." End quote. Almost immediately after receiving this alarming text from the mother of his children, who, by the way, again I reiterate, was alone in his house with his two very small children, Matthew texts his mistress. And his text to his mistress read, quote, "Haha, I'm sorry I didn't think about that. LOL." End quote. A few minutes after allegedly receiving this alarming text from Jessica and sending the other text to his mistress at 12:55 a.m., Matthew calls 911 and requests EMS. I can't insert audio yet, but I am going to go through the 911 call and tell you exactly what Matthew said. When Matthew calls 911, he very calmly asks for EMS to be sent, quote, "to my location," end quote. But keep in mind, Matthew is not home at this point because he also goes on to very calmly explain to the dispatcher that he is not in fact home and he is driving back as he spoke, going as fast as he can to get back to the house. He explains he will be there, quote, "in about 2 minutes," end quote. He tells the dispatcher that his wife is having suicidal thoughts. He basically explains the text message that Jessica had sent to him, a little while beforehand, where he wasn't so concerned, because he was texting his mistress, so he waited all this time. But now he tells the dispatcher he's concerned because she's alone in the house with the boys, and she appears to be suicidal. And he's speeding back to the house to check on her and the boys. He says to the dispatcher that he's hurrying back home to, quote, "just to make sure nothing is going to happen to them," end quote. So he's seemingly worried about the boys, but admittedly right there, he's not worried at all about his wife. Or at least he doesn't sound it or say it. The dispatcher then asks Matthew if there are any weapons in the home, and Matthew tells the dispatcher that the only weapon in the home is his service weapon. Then, while he's claiming to be driving home at 90 miles an hour, he receives another text message from his mistress at around 1 a.m. and he sends a text in response to the text she just sent him, and it said, quote, "give me a few to text back. Long story, I'll tell you later," end quote. This is when Matthew claims to have finally arrived back at his home. He says he ran inside the house and saw that the closet door in the master bedroom was locked. He started screaming Jessica's name. She was not responding. She wasn't anywhere else in the house. So he tried banging down the door. He's screaming her name. He could not get the door down. She still was not answering. He said he ran into the kitchen to grab his police radio off of the microwave. And while he was in there, he left his cell phone on the counter. Remember that. He left his cell phone on the counter and grabbed his police radio off of the microwave so that he can call in to get some help to the house because he believed Jessica had hurt herself inside the closet. Allegedly. It took about 10 seconds for Matthew retrieving his radio from the microwave to run outside, and call in on his radio asking for assistance, saying, quote, "I believe I just heard a shot fired coming into my residence. I just came up the stairs. 2 rounds. Be advised, I smell gun smoke and I can't get an answer to the door." End quote. All while his voice sounds like it's cracking, as if he's getting ready to cry or to start crying or choking up. Sounds like bullshit. According to official reports, within the frame of a minute's time, multiple officers arrived on scene and started making their way into the apartment. In the middle of all of this chaos, at 1:01 a.m., Matthew receives another text message from his mistress. But when the police and investigators later look at his cell phone records, it shows that this message was marked as read. That's really interesting. How did he read a text message from his mistress if he left his phone on the counter? I don't know why this whole phone thing comes into play, or why it's always brought up in all the information I've read, all the videos that I've seen, but for some reason it seems to be important. I don't know. While the officers on scene were making their way into the master bedroom, they heard 8-month-old Tyler crying and saw that 2-year-old Tolan was still sleeping. Matthew was not in the house trying to comfort his son right away. He was outside reading texts and texting back and forth with his mistress, I guess. Officers finally made their way to the master bedroom, and after pounding on the door and calling Jessica's name, just like Matthew had allegedly done, they got no answer and they kicked the closet door down, and this is where they found 19-year-old Jessica Boynton laying on the floor with her long hair drenched in blood, so much to the point, so saturated that they could not even tell that her hair was blonde. They couldn't even tell the color of her hair. It just looked wet red. There was a pillow underneath her head that was also covered in blood. There was a pool of blood on the pillow that she was laying in. Matthew's .40 caliber Glock service weapon was laying underneath her body. As the officers went inside the closet to remove Jessica's body for further examination, they got the shock of their lives when they realized that Jessica was still breathing. She was still alive. Officers quickly removed Jessica from the closet and put her on the floor of the master bedroom. Not only was Jessica alive and breathing, she was trying to fight off certain officers that were in the room. Also, one EMT went to try and take her pulse to see the strength of the pulse, and she reached up and grabbed his hand and squeezed. So she was alive, she was breathing, and she was fighting. Due to the amount of blood in Jessica's hair, the EMTs, the officers, the investigators, nobody could seem to find the bullet wounds in her head. Eventually, they started loading Jessica up into the ambulance to rush her to the hospital to help save her life, and this is when the police found inside of the closet 2 bullet holes. When forensics got involved later on, they determined the trajectory of the bullets. One of them went upward at a 54-degree angle, and the other one went upward at a 25-degree angle. It was also determined that each bullet went into a different wall of the closet. At 1:13 a.m., Spalding County Sheriff Wendell Beam was notified of the crime. Wendell Beam is Matthew Boynton's grandfather. Yes, you heard me right. No need to rewind. Matthew Boynton's grandfather is the sheriff. At around 4:00 a.m., investigators started knocking on neighbors' doors, and eventually they ended up speaking to the downstairs neighbor who was really good friends with Jessica. Right off the bat, immediately, they informed the officers that Jessica was not suicidal. She informed that Matthew was having an affair with a fellow officer or a dispatcher, so a co-worker. This neighbor, she told the investigators about, this is when she told investigators about Jessica's secret diary that she hid in the closet. This neighbor was a plethora of information. She told officers everything about the fighting, about how Jessica was starting a new job the next day, about how she was going to see a divorce attorney the following Monday. I don't know what day of the week this was, but the following Monday she was going to see the divorce attorney, and that the relationship was just absolutely toxic. She told the police about the argument that the couple had had the night before, where Jessica went back with the boys to go to Walmart with Matthew and was supposed to go and stay back at her house, but she never showed up. This same neighbor also informed the police that a couple of nights earlier, Jessica had actually called the police herself to make a report that Matthew had once again taken off with her children, and he would not get back to her texts. He would not answer her calls. She had no idea where they were, when they were coming back. So she called the police to report this, and Matthew was pretty pissed off about it. During that incident, a dispatcher had Facebook messaged Matthew and informed her that he really needed to go home with the boys because Jessica had just called the police on him. This is unprofessional, unethical, conflict of interest, completely unacceptable. I don't know who this dispatcher was, but if I were to wager a guess, I'd say it was whoever he was having an affair with, his dispatcher mistress. Don't know that for sure though, that's just me speculating. Other neighbors in the complex confirmed this neighbor's information about the messy divorce, the constant arguments, and the fact that Jessica had mentioned to some of them that she was going the following Monday to see the divorce attorney. A few of the neighbors also reported hearing a single gunshot at around 10:45 p.m. So within a few minutes of the family returning from the Walmart trip that night, and right before the officer Trammell came to take Matthew's report and did not go inside the house to see if Jessica was still there, based on the word that Matthew had said Jessica never came home from Walmart with them. So some of the neighbors, more than one, heard a single gunshot right around the time the family returned from the Walmart. So it's very possible that Jessica was wounded and bleeding, laying in the closet, dying, fighting for her life, while an officer was actually dispatched to her house and outside talking to her cop husband, and he decided to just take the cop husband's word for it and not go inside and look for himself. Had he done that, followed what I'm pretty sure is protocol, and gone inside to make sure that the wife, there's nothing wrong with her, or to at least get her side of the story, since Matthew was alleging physical violence, maybe this would have went down a little differently. But in fact, he didn't. He didn't do his job properly. Thanks, Officer Trammell. Thank you. Later that morning, Matthew was interviewed by investigators. He admitted right off the bat that he was having an affair, but he also claimed that Jessica was having one too. He claimed that she had had one at a time in the past when they were separated, and that their 8-month-old son, Tyler, in fact, was not Matthew's biological child, that Jessica told him this, that he knew this. So it was like, well, I'm having an affair, but look what she did to me. Poor me. She's in the hospital fighting for her life, but poor me. He reiterated for the millionth time that Jessica was physically assaulting him, physically abusive to him, and he claimed that he was looking forward to the divorce just as much as Jessica was. The GBI agent interviewing Matthew asked him if he had changed his clothes at all that night, and Matthew stated that no, he did not change his clothes. He was in fact wearing the same clothes all night. This is a blatant lie, another blatant lie, because in the Walmart surveillance footage, you can clearly see that Matthew is wearing a gray sweater. When the police walked into the house after he called them about Jessica being in the closet, they had body cams on, and Matthew was plainly wearing a bright red hoodie. That's unmistakable. Gray is not bright red. So he did in fact change his clothes, and if investigators had bothered to look at it right away, they would have seen that he lied about this as well. Matthew told the GBI agent that he didn't even wash his hands because, being a police officer, he knew that they were going to swab his hands for GSR, for gunshot residue. When the agent informed him that they were going to have to collect his clothes, Matthew responded with, quote, "Okay, that's fine, absolutely. I didn't try to brush off anything. I didn't try to wash off anything because I knew GSR and all that would be involved," end quote. That's mighty kind of you, Matthew. You're so smart. While Matthew was being interviewed by the GBI agents, the police started processing the crime scene. They started processing the house. And they were working with the theory that Jessica had walked into the closet, locked the door, faced the back wall, and shot herself in the head. The bullet ended up entering the wall on the top left part of the closet. The second bullet, however, was extremely confusing because based on the trajectory, the gun would have had to have been either on the floor or very close to it in order for the bullet to end up where it had on the back wall of the closet. If Jessica had shot herself in the head, as Matthew had gotten the investigators to believe, and as he was claiming, how was the second bullet fired? Because the first bullet, they know, hit her in the head based on the trajectory of it, or should have hit her in the head. Well, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Basically, the first shot should have injured her enough that she shouldn't have been able to fire a second shot, especially not from that trajectory, which I don't know. Confusing. Doesn't make sense. While trying to figure all of this out, investigators came across Jessica's secret diary that she had hidden in the closet. However, it was not hidden. It was laying plainly on top of a stack of clothes that were in the closet, and several pages were missing. Remember, she kept in this diary all of Matthew's indiscretions, their daily arguments, when he took off with the kids, when he came back. To this day, though, those bunch of pages that were missing and pulled out from the diary have never been found. Further testing of Matthew's service weapon did confirm that Jessica's DNA was on it. This seemingly backs up Matthew's account, the suicide theory. Unfortunately, investigators did not test the gun or Matthew's clothes for any of his DNA or gunshot residue on any of his belongings or on his person. They only checked for Jessica's DNA. They didn't even check for gunshot residue on Jessica's hands. I guess they just assumed it was there. Another interesting bit of information that police noticed while they were processing the closet was that aside from the pool of blood that was directly under Jessica's head, like on that pillow, there was no other blood in the closet. There was no gun splatter or spatter against the wall that you would see in 99.99% of cases where a gunshot wound, especially to the head, was involved. The only blood in that closet was what was underneath Jessica's head. Very, very bizarre. That's a very strange forensic observation, and it's one of many things up until this point that should have made investigators start looking at something other than the suicide theory that Matthew was putting in their head, at least to try and clear up some of this information, to try to clear it up a little bit. In my opinion, they were keeping their tunnel vision to make sure one of their own did not get investigated or, God forbid, charged with attempted murder or murder. And they had tunnel vision. They were trying to make the evidence fit their theory instead of their theory fitting the evidence. And that's horrible police work, and it never works out for the victim. And sometimes it doesn't work out for the suspect either, but it worked out just fine for Matthew Boynton in this case. I'm also curious to know why the investigating officers, it wasn't considered a conflict of interest for them to investigate their fellow police officer. Why wasn't this case immediately handed over to the GBI? I'm not going to get an answer to it because they continue to investigate this case in tandem with the GBI. I don't know, just putting it out there into the universe. The police found one bullet at the scene and assumed because they couldn't find the other one anywhere, even after the closet in the room was forensically gone over with a fine-tooth comb, they just assumed that it was lodged in Jessica's skull. However, back at the hospital, the doctor examining and taking care of Jessica in the trauma ward made a bizarre discovery of his own. Not only was the bullet not lodged in Jessica's skull or anywhere on her body, he determined that Jessica had not been shot. The wounds on Jessica's head had come from blunt force trauma. This is a doctor with 30 years of experience, and he said she was not shot. There's no entry wound, no exit wound. Jessica's fractured skull had the wound on top of her skull, so in order for her to shoot herself, if she did attempt suicide, which we now know she did not, she would have had to shot herself like this, directly on top of her head. I don't know if she's left-handed or right-handed, so kind of awkward. Not impossible, but awkward. This doctor also stated that he fully expected to see gunshot burns on Jessica's hands because he saw that in 99.9% of the cases again, and none was there. There were no gunshot burns on her hands or anywhere else. She was not shot. I reiterate, not shot. Blunt force trauma to the top of the head, to the top of the skull, with all that blood. She may have been shot at, but she wasn't shot. This doctor pointed out later on that there was no investigation done while Jessica was in the hospital. Nobody came to speak to him. Nobody called him on the phone. Nobody asked him anything. Jessica's clothing and hands weren't tested for anything by the GBI or the police officers, and the GBI never even contacted him for his examination report until July 20th, which is 3 whole months after the incident took place. They waited 3 months to call him and ask him what his findings were, to find out that she was not in fact shot. She didn't shoot herself and nobody else shot her. She was shot at. Again, sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I can't even believe this, especially with how this ends. Due to severe brain trauma and brain swelling, Jessica was put in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks directly upon arriving at the hospital. Nobody, her friends and family, nobody even knew if she was going to make it out of this alive, and they honestly didn't even expect her to. Matthew did not ever visit her in the hospital. He seemed to have no problem moving on with his life. While she was in this coma fighting for her life, he was removing specific objects from the home that belonged to Jessica without anybody's permission, and we'll get to what those objects were later. On May 10th, Jessica was finally out of her coma, she was stable, and she was ready to speak to investigators about what happened that night, or about what she can remember that night, because due to her injuries, she could not and still cannot to this day remember most of what happened that night. She could not say who assaulted her. She still can't. Jessica recounted to the GBI that she and Matthew had been fighting at the Walmart that night over a sexually explicit photograph he had received from his mistress that Jessica had seen. She then says that she remembers after they got home from Walmart that night, so she even remembers going home from Walmart with her family, with Matthew and the 2 boys, that Matthew went directly to bed. And Jessica had to do something really important. She had to clear up some issue about one of their children's medical insurance. There was some kind of dispute, I don't know, some kind of issue that she had to take care of. It was pressing and she had to do it right away. So she asked Matthew if he can either watch the kids for her for a few minutes while she went over to the leasing office of their apartment building and use the computer there, or if he could, take the kids with them and drive her over there. Matthew said no to both requests. He was not doing either one of those things. He was not helping with his own children. He was not helping resolve a dispute with medical insurance for his own son. He wasn't doing anything. Jessica said that after asking him multiple times and getting either no response or no as a response, she decided to pack the kids up in the car. Remember, this is late at night after 11 o'clock or just before 11 o'clock, and go to the leasing office with the 2 children and do what she had to do. She was going to be a single mom soon anyway, and she did not need him, and she was starting to realize that. So she went over there to the leasing office, did what she had to do. She came back. She got the boys into bed, settled down into bed. Matthew was still in bed, and she went into the walk-in closet to choose an outfit to wear for her first day of work the following morning, which was rapidly approaching, by the way. I just saw in my notes, and I just want to state that I always think it's really bizarre and really weird when a husband considers watching his own children like babysitting. Like, she shouldn't have had to ask him. She should have just said, I'm running to the leasing office, the kids are in their room, or the kids are watching TV. The only time I've ever had that problem was in the abusive relationships I was in, that the guy or the father would think that he was doing me some kind of favor by watching his own child for me. That's not a favor, guys. That's being a parent. It's not only the mother's job. And that just annoyed me that he had the balls to say no when she was nice enough to just ask him. Because when that's me, I'm like, listen, I'm going to do this. RJ is, watching cartoons. Make sure he's in bed within the next 20 minutes. I'll be home in a half hour. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Despite what she can't remember from that night, Jessica is vehement and adamant about one thing. She would never, ever attempt to take her own life. She was not suicidal. She had never been suicidal. She said she loved her boys more than anything in the entire world. She was not depressed about the divorce. She was excited about it. She was relieved about it. She was starting a new job the next day. She was looking forward to being a single mom and moving forward without this piece of shit in her life. She wanted out, and she was happy to be getting out. She didn't even care he was having an affair. If you remember, I told you she was relieved. She's adamant. She vehemently denies attempting to take her own life that night. She knows that for 100% certain, as does everybody who knew her well and even just knew her in passing, except for Matthew. Oh, and his fellow police officer buddies, right? Because they refused to investigate this as anything other than a suicide, even when all of the evidence pointed in a completely different direction that indicates that their little buddy boy in blue, tried to kill his wife that night. Jessica even told investigators that one time Matthew had asked her to go and grab his gun for him out of his gun holster so that he can clean his service weapon, and she didn't even know how to get it out of there. She couldn't get it out of the holster, let alone know how to shoot it. This was also confirmed by friends and family that Jessica did not like guns, and she never handled guns, and she didn't know how to handle a gun. When she was confronted with the seemingly suicidal text message she had allegedly sent to Matthew that night, the one that was sent from her phone, she said that, number one, that's not the way she texts. Number two, she would have used different wording and grammar. She knows for an absolute fact that she did not send that text message to Matthew, and had the police just did a little bit of their job and investigated, they could have seen where that phone was when it sent that text. Were Matthew and Jessica's phones together? Because remember, she was at the house and he was 4 miles away at the Waffle House. I don't know if that would have done anything, because I don't know how many cell towers were there, if they would have pinged off the same tower because they're within 4 miles, but it would have at least been worth investigating, but they didn't. She says she did not send that text, that someone, Matthew, used her phone to send the text to him. He was alibying himself. So let's review, and I'm going to look down to read so I get this right. The forensic evidence, such as blood evidence and bullet trajectory, did not add up to a suicide. A doctor with more than 30 years' experience concluded Jessica's wound was the result of blunt force trauma, and she hadn't been shot at all, let alone by her own hand. Jessica had never had any history of suicide attempts or thoughts. She had no idea how to handle a firearm, and there was no evidence she had ever handled one. And everyone aside from Matthew had confirmed that Jessica was not suicidal. Matthew was having an affair, and the couple were about to start divorce proceedings. There were no bullet fragments or bullets found in Jessica's skull, and the angle she would have had to have shot herself was near impossible. Neither Matthew nor Jessica were tested for gunshot residue, and neither of their clothes from that night were examined at all. Despite all of this evidence to the contrary, the GBI closed Jessica's case and ruled it as an attempted suicide. I know. Save it for the comments, guys. The two pieces of evidence that they claim supported their ruling were the, quote, suicidal text, end quote, sent from Jessica's phone to Matthew that night, and Jessica's DNA being found on Matthew's gun. Because he couldn't have put it there, right? He couldn't have put the gun in her hand and then shoved it underneath. I don't know, right? He couldn't have possibly sent that text. Another case that makes me really angry, because we have a survivor who went through all of this with no freaking justice. After having to go through all of this, upon being released from the hospital because of her suicide attempt and everything that had gone on, Matthew was granted full custody of both of the Boynton children. So both of Jessica's sons. She was allowed 1 day a week supervised visit that I think was limited to 1 hour. So 1 hour a week supervised. Because the courts thought she had attempted to kill herself while she was alone in the house with the boys. So obviously when she gets out of the hospital, that's the evidence according to the police and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation points to the fact that she did in fact do that. I can see why the courts did that. But how horrible and heartbreaking for Jessica. After returning home from the hospital, Jessica also discovered, if you remember, I mentioned earlier some items of Jessica's that Matthew had removed from the house when she was in the coma fighting for her life. Jessica noticed that these items were missing. These items were some clothing, some jewelry, her laptop, and her dental retainer, of all things. On December 19th, 2016, Jessica filed a police report saying that these items had been stolen or were missing. I'm not sure which. Detectives then went to Matthew and asked him, they gave him a list of the items that were described by Jessica and asked him, did he know where the items were? Could he just give them back to her? Matthew stated on record and told the police that he did not know anything about any of these items. He never removed them from the house and he has no idea where they are. However, a few months later, on May 11th, 2017, a man named William Sanders brought a bag to the investigators, a duffel bag, a red duffel bag, containing the missing items, all except for the laptop, and he informed that a woman claiming to be Matthew's new girlfriend had found the items as they were left in Matthew's old apartment, I think when he went to move in with her. Not the apartment Matthew shared with Jessica, but the apartment he moved into when Jessica, I guess, got out of the hospital. I don't know. The alleged girlfriend claimed that these items were left behind when Matthew left her apartment or his apartment. It was a little confusing. Either way, Matthew was in possession of these items, so he had lied to the police while he was a police officer. And there's justice for this handed out. Not for what he did to Jessica, but the police made sure he paid for lying to them about such a small thing, about getting rid of some of her clothes and jewelry, and not even getting rid of it, just taking it out of the house and putting it somewhere. In July of 2017, Matthew Boynton was placed on administrative leave, and shortly after that, he was arrested and charged with 2 felonies, which I'm pretty sure involve the lying. Not attempted murder. Nothing to do with Jessica, remember. 2 felonies for lying about the missing items that don't even matter. I'd like to know what was on that laptop, but seriously? After his arrest, Matthew resigned from the police department, and to this day, he and Jessica still share custody of their 2 sons. No charges were ever brought up on Matthew or anybody else for what happened to Jessica, and she still has her case being closed, saying that she attempted to kill herself while she was alone in the house with her 2 children. So she has to see Matthew all the time, running free, and he gets arrested and possibly, I don't know if he went to jail or not, and he still gets custody of the kids. That's all I have on this, guys. You obviously know what my opinion is. I've been stating it throughout. I want to hear what your opinion is. Please be sure to like, subscribe if you're not subscribed. I have such a passion for covering true crime stories. I also love paranormal. I haven't done anything really big with paranormal recently, but I am getting on it. And if you want to check out something paranormal, the BEK, I'll put it up here, or actually it's up here. Or, you know, think about watching maybe the Corinna Slusser, that was a good one. Or check out one of the playlists at the end of my video. So, yeah, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already. I haven't started posting anything but videos on there because I don't have much of a following yet, but I'm working on that. Remember, guys, that my podcast with Steve Stockton called Strange Things with Steve Stockton, Gemma Jade, is coming out within the next couple of weeks. And we have Throwback Thursday this week, even though that Louise Josephine Massett case did not do very well as far as views and likes. But you guys can always watch it and like it. So let me know what you think about all that. I want to know your opinions on this case. I want to know what you think. If you think she actually attempted suicide, and I want to know why. Also, guys, know that I promised you a video of the Halloween party, which I'm putting together a short because it snowed here in New Jersey on the day before Halloween, and there was so much of it still on the ground. My sister had to bring all the animatronics inside the house. Half the people that were coming to the party couldn't get there, but we had a blast. It was a lot of fun. I have pictures, so that's coming out soon. That's just going to be a short little few minute thing to show you all the animatronics and just our party and all the costumes and stuff. I meant to mention this in the beginning. I have such a sore throat. It just came on out of nowhere. I got my Kratom last week. I've been taking it and not like feeling anything. But one of my subscribers, thank you, Silky Johnson, mentioned to me that I cannot take it with Suboxone in my system, which I was trying to find out. I could not find anything using the Safari browser. I kept saying, can I take Kratom with Suboxone in my system? And I cannot find a straight answer. So I have the white Borneo Kratom capsules, and I'm waiting for the Suboxone to get out of my system. Even when taking it with Suboxone, I could feel it like kind of in the back of my body, working in the background, making me more mellow and definitely elevating my mood. But I'm looking for the euphoria. I'm looking for the energy. So within another day or two, I should be able to have some results on that. So look for that video at the end of this week. Maybe it'll be a Saturday or Sunday one. I most likely will be filming from my sister's house this Saturday. And that's about it. So that's everything that's coming up. I'm sorry about my voice. I'm hoping to post Throwback Thursday video this week. Hopefully my voice clears up. I want to try to do something with addiction and recovery tomorrow or Wednesday. Wednesday I have clinic, so probably I'll update you on that, and that'll be the addiction and recovery, and I'll read some of that online book that I found. Just randomly found it about a fictional story about what happened 15 years after the legalization of all drugs in the United States. Guys, be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything and can gain you so much. Have your best day, have your best night, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.